Environmental crisis has been regarded as one of the major problems that humankind are facing today. When talking about environmental crisis, have you ever thought of addressing the crisis from the spiritual side? This thought seems to cross the mind of Paul Schrader. His latest film, First Reformed, has an intriguing narrative about a reverend struggling with his faith in the face of environmental crisis. While there has been a lot of discussion on First Reformed, only a little has been done to explore the intersectionality between environmentalism and Christianity in the film. Therefore, I'm going to examine how the movie First Reformed represents the position of environmental concerns within the Christian teachings. I'm going to look into the film's cinematic elements and use the framework of eco-theology by Jurgen Moltmann and Kierkegaard's philosophy of despair. The film is about the journey of Reverend Toller, the leader of a Dutch colonial church called First Reformed, in bringing environmentalism to his church. It also contains the story of how Toller copes with his traumas, his failing health, his conflict with Reverend Jeffers of Abundant Life, First Reformed's parent church, and also his growing affection towards Mary Mansana. Toller's journey towards environmentalism starts with Michael and Mary Mansana. Mary, who is currently pregnant, has asked Toller to counsel her husband Michael, who is a radical environmentalist. After a series of events involving the discovery of suicide vest in Mansana's garage and eventually to Michael's suicide, Toller is beginning to take up eco-theological perspective. Toller's immersion to environmentalism starts with a moving camera. First Reformed mostly uses cut-to-cut technique, and the camera movement is restricted. However, there are some instances where the camera is no longer stagnant. The moving camera happened during scenes which involve Mary Mansana. As a woman and a mother-to-be, Mary could be considered to symbolize nature, as the figure of woman and mother has been considered to symbolize the world through the term the Great World Mother and the Mother Earth. Moving the camera during moments with Mary signified that Reverend Toller is leaning and immersing himself more into nature and environmentalism. Reverend Toller also starts to pay attention to his health and his environment. He goes to see the doctor and removes the barbed wire in the churchyard to prevent animals got caught in it. Toller's big immersion into environmentalism is reflected through his words, which evidently contains eco-theological ideas. The first words to be discussed is Toller's monologue at Handstown Kills.
Every act of preservation is an act of creation. Everything preserved renews creation. It's how we participate in creation. I've found another form of prayer.
Toller emphasizes the preservation of creation. When humans preserve nature, they also preserve the spirit within, which equals to the act of praying to God. The second time Reverend Toller brings up the topic of nature and God is during the talk between him and Reverend Jeffers of Abundant Life.
And what of his creation? The heavens declare the glory of God. God is present everywhere in every plant, every river, every tiny insect. The whole world is a manifestation of his holy presence. I think this is an issue where the church can lead, but they say nothing.
In both dialogues, Toller is emphasizing the immanence of God, which is one of the concepts in Jurgen Moltmann's creation doctrine. By bringing up the idea of God's presence in our natural world, Reverend Toller is calling us to respect and treasure nature as we would respect and treasure God. However, during his mission to create a room for discussion of environmental crisis, Reverend Toller has to face his own despair. Toller is still unable to move on from his son's death and his wife who left. Michael Mansana's death also deepens Toller's despair. The despair has led him to believe that drastic actions might provide solutions to his problem. This includes believing in the concept of environmental martyrdom, which Michael brought up during the counseling session. Reverend Toller also starts to assemble Michael's suicide vest, and he plans to use it. Toller's surroundings also contribute to the accumulation of his despair, as his eco-theological ideas are strongly opposed by Reverend Jeffers, the leader of Abundant Life Church. Reverend Jeffers of Abundant Life possess a strong belief in a human-centric mission. It is apparent from his words when arguing with Reverend Toller.
You don't live in the real world.
Right.
You don't. You are a minister at a tourist church that no one attends. Do you have any idea what it takes to do God's work?
I'm trying.
To maintain a mission of this size, the staffing, the outreach, the amount of people that we touch each day.
Reverend Jeffers implies that doing something for the real world means reaching out to as many people as possible, which is to be expected as his church is the embodiment of prosperity theology, a theology which focuses solely on human prosperity and does not support the doctrine of creation. Meanwhile, the First Reformed Church represents the traditional church whose mission is centered on salvation and evangelism. This type of church has the bigger potential of adopting ecological doctrine, as the doctrine has been discussed as a new way to fulfill evangelical mission. This opposing views of nature that comes from his community has managed to convince Toller that violence is the only way to fix the situation. However, Reverend Toller eventually decides to call off his terrorism plan due to the last-minute appearance of Mary Manzana. To better understand the film's resolution, we will look into two important scenes. The first scene is the magical mystery tour. During this scene, Toller is wearing a black outfit, whereas Mary is wearing white. As they lie on top of each other, white on top of black, we can see an image of yin and yang, which is a famous concept of equilibrium from the Eastern religion. This suggests that when Christianity, represented by Toller, and nature, represented by Mary, have a balanced relationship, it will result in the restoration of nature, as seen through the images of clean and flourishing nature. However, when Toller moves his head slightly to his right and no longer aligned with Mary, the images start to change into those of environmental destruction. This shows how misalignment of the two could cause horrible consequences, as seen through the images of environmental collapse. The yin and yang allusion also appears at the end of the film. Toller has to cancel his suicide bombing plan after knowing that Mary comes to the reconsecration ceremony. Toller strips out of the suicide vest and unexpectedly wraps a barbed wire around his body. Toller then wears a white robe, throws away the whiskey in his cup, and pours drain cleaner into the cup. However, Toller doesn't get to drink it because of the presence of Mary Manzana. Mary's presence can be seen as God's way to take away Toller's despair, as significant changes happen in the following scene. Toller walks to the front room and approaches Mary. Once again, we see the yin and yang allusion here, reinforcing the message that Christianity and nature are complementary to each other. When Toller and Mary kiss, the camera circles them. The room is also visibly brighter than Toller's bedroom. This scene gives an image that the world could be a brighter place when Christianity and nature start to recognize that they are inseparable, and together they can make a significant change to the current environmental crisis. First Reformed has demonstrated the ways Christianity could be both an ally and an enemy of environmentalism. However, the film's final message leans more towards the way the church can respond to the crisis through embracing insights and values beyond Christianity's core doctrine that are more in line with environmental concerns, such as seeing nature as a female figure and the idea of harmony illustrated through a yin and yang symbolism.